You know, it's all too easy to take things in this world for granted. The familiar faces we see every day, like the jovial local business owner, the antiques dealer you barely know but who treats you like a dear member of his own extended family, or the bus driver who hums haunting sea shanties as he drives you into town. But what if these are mere illusions? What if, behind these cheerful characters, lies a deeper truth? Something with roots in the past, in folklore and strange tales. I'm your mayor, David Scare, and this is the first special episode of Town, a podcast about Animal Crossing from Hi-Score.Club. Please note that this episode will not be suitable for children and contains themes that some may find disturbing. I've dedicated every spare moment in these last few years to doing esoteric research in some of the dustiest corners of the internet, viewing fan wikis edited by anonymous authors, scrolling through barely intelligible ancient forum threads, decrypting ASCII glyphs, and even reading at least one actual book. And what I've discovered about Animal Crossing may surprise you. It may intrigue you, and it may even frighten you. So please, join me for a few special episodes that will take a deeper look into the truth behind some of Animal Crossing's best-loved characters. This episode is your friend and mine, Tom Nook. Ah yes, Tom Nook, the raccoon tycoon who's a consistent and reassuring presence through every game in the Animal Crossing series. You might know Tom Nook as the founder of a travel company or as a real estate agent. But to me, he'll always be the jolly and generous, if somewhat demanding, apron-clad owner of the town's general store, Nook's Cranny. Now, I love entering Nook's Cranny. In fact, it's no exaggeration to say that you could find me thrusting in and out of Nook's Cranny several times a day to check on new stock, sell items, and support this vital engine of the local economy. In all of the games apart from New Leaf, the shop begins as a humble shed with a tin roof, a cosy if rustic interior, and a limited selection of goods. And in the early games, you'll become a part-time employee of Nook's Cranny, running errands and making deliveries to your town's residents to pay off your first loan. And that first loan comes from Tom Nook. So, despite his humble surroundings and attire, somehow Nook is willing to lend you enough money to acquire a home. Ever wonder about that? Sure, mostly thanks to your hard work, his business is on the up. But maybe there's more to Tom Nook than the state of his cranny might suggest. In Wild World, if you talk to your town's characters enough and meet certain conditions, they will start to open up and gradually reveal an intertwined soap opera-style backstory. And in doing so, you can learn a lot more about what drives Tom Nook. About how, as a young man, or raccoon anyway, he left your small town for the big city, a cold place that crushed his dreams. He tells the player, "This town is laid back and easy to live in. Life in the city is completely different. It's a scary place, yes. It's a place where, unless you have money, no one will give you the time of day. It's just as they say, A concrete jungle. Take the big city banks, for example. They will deny a young man a loan, though they know nothing of his character." And later on, he gives the player some hard-earned business advice. Expand your business only as far as you yourself can keep track of, yes? Trust no one. In this area, you can't hire someone to manage for you. The city is very scary, Say you have someone to trust. Why, they might be waiting for you to turn your back so they can take your assets. And later still, he hints about betrayal. I wonder, do you know the number one reason friends become enemies? Well, it all starts with a small business loan between pals. No matter how much you trust someone, you should never let a friend borrow money, Unless you're willing to loan it to them assuming you'll never get it back. If a friend approaches you asking for help, you must be firm and say no. It sounds callous, but no, the longer you live, the more you'll understand. Even the most solid friendships become fragile when money is involved. This is something I learned firsthand when I was young. It's the truth. And so, where does that leave Tom Nook when we meet him today? Yes, I lost everything. I gathered a few meagre possessions and slunk home. Yes, city life was rough, savage and wild. But all was not dire, Because I experienced the despair of rock bottom, I was able to push myself to become the success that I am now, yes! And there's a lot more to the tale. If you don't wish to spend months playing Wild World to discover it all for yourself, you can find the whole thing on Game FAQs. Now, there's another twist to Tom Nook. What if there's something else that's been a bit off about the character? Like, what if I told you he isn't actually a raccoon at all? Quite. And no, I'm not referring to the unconfirmed rumour, likely started by Dr. Shrunk, that Nook is a human in an animal suit. I'm talking about an aspect of his character that's kind of lost on Western audiences, where Nook is localised to being a raccoon. But in Japan, he's recognised as a Tanuki. Tom Nookie, if you will. So, what is a Tanuki? Basically just a raccoon, right? No, how dare you! Tanuki are a different kind of animal, confusingly known as raccoon dogs, which are similar in appearance to raccoons, but apparently they're very different. What's important to know is that Tanuki play a prominent role in Japanese folklore as one of the archetypal mythical, supernatural creatures known as yokai. And the yokai version of Tanuki have some pretty distinctive characteristics. You might have seen statues of them outside restaurants in Japan, sometimes with a wide-brimmed straw hat holding a lantern or a drink, but usually with a big round belly and, I can't put this any other way, grotesquely large testicles. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to dwell on those for a second. In traditional Japanese culture, big scrotums symbolise not fertility, but wealth and prosperity. This feels in thematic keeping with our friend Tom Nook, who possibly hides the size of his wealth beneath his shopkeeper's apron, or from behind that desk in resident services. Tanuki are well known to be pranksters, using their ability to shapeshift themselves and other objects to get up to all sorts of hijinks. You might have seen the Tanuki suit in Super Mario Bros. 3, which allows Mario to turn into a statue. As a child, I never understood why this was, but in a game where you can steal a giant shoe from a Goomba and then bounce around in it, I just took the weirdness for granted. Tanuki are even said to take human form, as you can see illustrated in the Studio Ghibli film Pom Poko. And those giant testicles can be stretched out or inflated for a surprising range of uses, including as drums, umbrellas, boats, picnic blankets, and fishing nets. A well-known Tanuki prank is to transform leaves into other objects, including money, which they then spend, only for the poor recipient to find it's been turned back into a pile of leaves long after the Tanuki has left. And there's another possible Animal Crossing connection here. Ever wonder why items in the games are represented by leaves that turn into objects? Just something to think about. And in fact, there are some disturbing stories about these powers of transformation. Normally, folktales portray Tanuki as cheeky pranksters and agents of mild chaos. But here's one that takes things a little further. Me. The old folktale of Kachi Kachiyama, the Crackling Mountain Story, or The Revenge of the Hare, adapted by me, for you. An elderly couple live alone in the mountains, farming the land for food. Alone, that is, except for a friendly anthropomorphic hare that lives in the local area and helps them out. And except for a no-good Nick Tanuki. Often the Tanuki will be found sitting on a tree stump beside the field where the wizened old husband sows his beans, and cruelly taunts him from a safe distance with seed-based insults like, "All your seeds will rot like unsold turnips on a Monday morning," and "Where'd you find those stinky old beans? Up your bum?" Understandably, the old man grows weary of having to put up with this day after day, especially since the hypocritical Tanuki keeps stealing the beans it claims are so worthless. So one day, he sets a trap on the Tanuki's favourite taunting spot by planting a pitfall seed right next to it. The next time the Tanuki turns up to disparage the old man's beans, "Your beans taste like sick! Get better beans!" The old man lets out a roar and lunges at it. The Tanuki dodges the lunge but steps right on the pitfall, meaning the old man can easily bind it in rope. He carries it home triumphantly to show the wife. He bursts through the door of their home. "Tanuki stew tonight," he announces, hauling the bound Tanuki up and over a rafter. "Ooh, what a plump Tanuki," says the old lady gleefully, prodding at its belly. "A stew would be delicious with some millet cakes." "Good idea," says the husband. "I'm off to town to check the turnip prices. Keep an eye on that naughty Tanuki and don't let it escape." So the old lady sets about pounding millet for the cakes, with the Tanuki dangling above her. Watching her toil below, it spots an opportunity. "That looks like hard work, old woman. Why not let me down and I'll give you a hand?" At first the wife is suspicious. But the work is hard, and the charming Tanuki is persuasive, so they strike a deal. She unties it on the condition that it will be tied up again before her husband returns. Unfortunately, it doesn't hold up its end of the bargain, holding up instead the millet pounder, which, I'm sorry to say, it uses to bludgeon the old lady to death. And then boils her up as a simple and nutritious one-pot meal. If you think that's bad, you're really not going to like what happens next. The Tanuki shapeshifts to take on the guise of the recently deceased wife, waits for the husband to return home, and then feeds him the disturbingly hearty stew. After the husband has taken his last mouthful of stew, the Tanuki reverts to its true form and takes great pleasure in revealing the truth to the horrified man before bounding off into the night. Sure, a one-pot meal is efficient because it creates less washing up, ideal for the weary subsistence farmer. But the good news about the washing up wasn't enough for this man to overlook the fact he'd just eaten a large portion of his dead wife. Hearing the old man's wails of despair, the hare comes rushing down the mountain and asks what's wrong. And, after learning what happened, the hare, who loved the elderly couple, vows to seek revenge on the Tanuki. Now, the types of revenge may vary depending on which version of the story you hear, but they all seem to be an escalating series of vicious pranks which I am not endorsing. Please, if your wife gets cooked up into a stew by a magical raccoon dog, report it to the authorities and don't take matters into your own hands. Still, on we go. The first thing this hare did was to go pulling up clumps of dry weeds near where the Tanuki likes to go foraging. The Tanuki, who didn't know of the hare's friendship with the elderly couple, comes over to ask the hare what it's doing. "Oh, I'm pulling up 20 clumps of weeds so I can craft a hay bed for the winter," the hare replies. The Tanuki likes the sound of that. "If I help, can I come and stay at your place for the winter?" it asks. "Go on then, why not?" agrees the hare. Once they've gathered all they can, the pair begin to trek back along the narrow mountain path, the clumps of weeds bound to their backs. While the Tanuki's in front, the hare follows close behind and begins to strike flintstones together. Clack, clack! Clack, clack! "Did you hear that?" the Tanuki asks. "Like a clacking sound?" "Oh, that's just the crying of the clack-clack mountain clack-clack bird," says the hare, like it's no big deal. "The crying of the clack-clack bird? Okay." The Tanuki is a bit confused, but doesn't really have time to process it, because at that point, its bundle of precisely 20 weed clumps, required to craft a hay bed, don't forget, catches fire. "What's this now?" cries the Tanuki. "Do you hear a boo-boo sound?" This is where it gets a bit dark, I'm afraid. Boo-boo, if I'm pronouncing it right, is a Japanese onomatopoeia for fire burning. "Oh, that's just the cry of a boo-boo bird," says the hare. "I see," says the Tanuki doubtfully. "The boo-boo bird is..." And then at that point, the weeds are fully on fire and the heat reaches the Tanuki's back. It tries to take the bundle off its back, but it's too late. "Hot! Hot! Quickly! Put it out!" cries the Tanuki in a panic. But the hare is no help at all, and it just watches as the Tanuki runs off all smouldery. The next day, the Tanuki comes across the hare again, this time shaking a wasp's nest out of a tree. It wanders over. "Hey, it's you!" yells the Tanuki, who is really in quite a bad way due to the incident with the burning. "How could you do this to me back on Clack Clack Mountain?" pointing at its horribly burned back. "I don't know what you're talking about, mate," says the hare. "I'm the Mustard Mountain hare. I don't know about Clack Clack Mountain." "Well, if that's the case, what are you doing here?" challenges the Tanuki. "As it happens, I'm making medicine for burns," says the hare. The Tanuki smiles. "What luck. Please apply some to my back." And so the hare slathers a preparation of searing hot mustard and pepper into the Tanuki's wounds. And you know what? Maybe it has some antibacterial properties, but I don't think that's why the hare does it. The Tanuki howls in pain and shock, and its wounds burn all over again, and it slinks away back into the forest once more. Lesson learned? Somehow, no. Later, once again, it meets the hare. The hare pretends to be a different hare. This time it's got some ruse to make a boat so it can go out to sea and catch multiple C+ sea bass in preparation for the winter. And guess what? The Tanuki wants in. Fine, I'll make you a boat, and a strong one too, offers the Hare, but you'll have to get all the crafting materials. Bash some rocks and bring me all the clay you can carry. The Tanuki returns with an inventory full of clay, which the Hare mixes with resin, not currently a material available in New Horizons, to make a sturdy-looking boat. Your ship is ready, declares the Hare. Let's go fishing right away. The pair grab their oars and set off from the shore, the Tanuki in its clay boat, the Hare in a wooden one. Once at a good fishing spot out at sea, the Hare begins to sing a mysterious tune, while rhythmically striking the top of its boat with an oar. Hare, what's that song you're singing, and why are you hitting your boat? When I do this, the fish will appear, calls the Hare. Well, it must be more fun than crafting bait. Not to be outdone, the Tanuki tries imitating the song and whacks at its boat too. It doesn't take long for the clay boat to begin rapidly disintegrating. What? My boat is sinking, shouts the Tanuki. Help me, Hare! Once again, the Hare ignores the Tanuki when it's most in need. The Tanuki scrabbles for some part of the boat to hold on to, but it's all dissolving away, like those videos of the raccoons with the candy floss in the water. So tragic. Oh, what's the use? At this moment, the Hare turns to the Tanuki and says, This is revenge for the old lady you killed and turned into a one-pot meal. Didn't you realise? The Tanuki hadn't realised, but now it seems quite obvious that actually it was the same Hare every time doing these cruel pranks. Oh dear, it knows when it's been beaten. And so with this, the Tanuki droops its head and sinks down into the depths of the ocean. But don't feel too sorry for the Tanuki. It did, after all, murder an elderly woman and feed her to her husband. The end. Now don't you worry about our friend Tom Nook. It's very unlikely to find a reference to this grim story in Animal Crossing, and whatever problems Tom Nook may have had in the past, I think we can rule out murder. But remarkably, there may be a reference to this story in one other cheerful Nintendo game, Super Mario Sunshine. In World 6, Noki Bay, there's a Tanuki who rents out boats, mud boats, that dissolve if they stay in one place for too long or if they make contact with an object. Is this a reference, or is this coincidence? You decide. Maybe tweet at HiScore.Club if you have a strong opinion. If hearing about Tanuki has wet your warp whistle, check out the show notes for this episode where I've included links to my research. And that almost brings us to the end of this first Yokai Special. There are a few more special episodes in the works, so please stay subscribed for those, but if this is your first time listening to the show, welcome. Please do go back to the start and listen to the 6-episode miniseries of Town. If you go to the HiScore.Club YouTube channel, you can watch lots of really fun Animal Crossing Island tours recorded over the last couple of years, and if you follow us on Twitch, you can join the chat as we stream live tours. Find links to all these things, including our Discord community, over at HiScore.Club.com, and keep an eye on our Twitter for updates and announcements. And as always, you can write to us at astown@HiScore.Club.com. Until next time, sweet dreams. Town is produced by me, David Fair, for Hi-Score.Club. I used various different sources to put together my version of the old folktale of Kachi Kachi Yama, which I've linked to in the show notes. Music for the Town theme song, Mayor in an Empty Town, is composed and performed by Christopher Alcock. Hi-Score.Club is a little video game club for good games and equally good people. Why not join our Discord server? You can find us on Twitter, Instagram and Twitch. Pro tip, that's Hi spelt H-I. Town is not even slightly affiliated with Nintendo.
Still on hold. What would you say to do about it? But maybe one day you'll come around, never again in your house town. But maybe one day you'll come around, never again in your house town. Stupid things we use just like